Everybody, welcome to Tisch College's Civic Life Lunch, the Spin Room, dissecting the presidential debate with Scott Jennings and Robby Mook. My name is Bennett. Bennett Dembski. I'm a junior in the School of Arts and Sciences, where I'm studying political science, and it's my pleasure to kick off today's event. As always, we're grateful for the support of our wonderful co-sponsors, Jumbo Vote and the Political Science Department. Thank you for all that you do to prepare Tufts students to be politically engaged this fall and every year. If you aren't registered to vote yet, please head to vote.tufts.edu so you can do that before the Massachusetts voter registration deadline, which is October 24th. So just a reminder about some things coming up. Next week, Tisch College is going to be hosting the executive director of ruralorganizing.org, Matt Hildreth, on Monday, followed by Congressman Joe Kennedy III on Tuesday. You can find more information about that and register for those opportunities by visiting tischcollege.tufts.edu/events. So just before we get started, I want to remind everyone in the Zoom room that there's going to be an opportunity for you to ask questions at the end. So please keep an eye on the chat for instructions on how to do that. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Robby Mook, Scott Jennings, and Dean Alan Solomon. So Robby is a nationally recognized political strategist. He's organized winning organizations at the local, state, and national level. He served as campaign manager for Hillary Clinton's 2016 presidential campaign, where he built a $1 billion, 50-state, 4,500-person operation. He also ran Terry McAuliffe's winning campaign to be governor of Virginia, Gene Sheen's first winning campaign for U.S. Senate, and he led the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee in 2012 when the Democrats picked up 8 seats. He's currently president of the House Majority PAC, as well as a senior fellow at the Belfer Center for Science and International Affairs at the Harvard Kennedy School. Scott Jennings is a founding partner of RunSwitch Public Relations, which is Kentucky's largest PR and public affairs firm. He's also a political commentator on CNN, where you may have seen him a couple of times. His career has taken him across the country. He's been a part of 4 presidential campaigns and numerous federal and state races. He served in key roles in both the President George W. Bush's campaigns, where he became special assistant to President George Bush in 2005, where he served under Karl Rove. He's held senior campaign positions for Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, Congressman Brett Guthrie, and he served on Senator Mitt Romney's 2012 presidential campaign. But most importantly, he is currently a professor of political science as Tisch College professor of the practice, and I'm taking his class, Modern U.S. Political Campaign Strategy, which has been great. We're learning all about how campaigns work, how they're structured, how they spend their money, and it's only been a few weeks, but it's been fantastic, and we're learning a lot. Robby and Scott may be on opposite sides of the political spectrum, but they actually know each other quite well. They co-teach a class at the Harvard Institute of Politics on modern American political campaigns that's very similar to the class I'm taking now. And joining them in conversation today is Alan Solomon, the Dean of Tisch College. Dean Solomon is no stranger to politics and organizing. In fact, his first job after graduating from Tufts was as a community organizer. He's a lifelong social and political activist, and he previously served as the U.S. ambassador to Spain and Andorra under President Obama. Before he served in Spain, Dean Solomon chaired the bipartisan board of directors of the Corporation for National and Community Service, which is the federal agency that oversees domestic service programs like AmeriCorps, Learn and Serve America, Vista, and Senior Plan. He also served as finance chair of the Democratic Party in the late 1990s, and he played key roles in the presidential campaigns of John Kerry, Al Gore, Bill Clinton, Michael Dukakis, and Barack Obama. So with that, it is my pleasure to introduce Scott Jennings, Dean Alan Solomon, and Robby Mook.
Bennett, thanks a lot. I hope you just earned yourself an A in Scott's course. I thought you did a good job at promoting it, but we are appreciative of Scott teaching. One of the things that Tisch College tries to do is bring practitioners to campus to share their real life and real world experiences with our students. So we very much appreciate that. I also want to just emphasize what Bennett said about these two guys from opposite sides of the aisle, who are part of a sort of a club of folks who really believe politics is an important pursuit and an important path. And no matter what partisan differences separate us, I think we're all drawn to this work. And I know Robby and Scott are both drawn to this work because of a deep belief in our democracy and the importance of participating. And I hope that'll come through to our audience. I want to thank everybody who's joining us today and this Friday midday. We've had record audiences for our both our Distinguished Speaker Series and our Civic Life Lunches, and we hope to continue that. I'm sorry that this is a slow news day, guys, but let's start with today's news. The president and Melania Trump have tested positive for COVID-19. The media is reporting that 21 family members and senior staff flew on Air Force One to the debate in Cleveland on Tuesday. They sat unmasked in the same hall as the Vice President Biden's entourage. The president also attended a private fundraiser this week and was, I believe, on travel every day. The president and the first lady are now in quarantine at the White House, presumably for the next 14 days. We don't know who else in the president's inner circle, other than Hope Hicks, will be in quarantine. So let me ask you, how this is going to affect the campaign of both candidates? How will it affect or impact the dynamics of the race? And I'm going to ask Scott to begin to address that. And then Bobby, by the way.
All right, thanks, Alan, and appreciate all of you all logging in today. Thank you, Bennett, for the introduction. Bennett is getting an A in the class right now, but he is getting a D for interior design. I see a lot of art or flowers or anything on the walls, Bennett. You may want to work on it. We'll go over that in class on Monday. And Robbie, good to be with you, sir, as always. My friend Robbie, who I've known for a couple of years now, and I just have to say has rapidly become one of my favorite people. Sometimes people say, that's my favorite person in politics. Robbie's just one of my favorite people, and period. And so thank you, Robbie. So I have been giving some thought, of course. I figured the president had it when he tweeted last night that he was going into quarantine. I sort of assumed at that point that he had it. And of course, this came right on the heels of a big conversation in the country about what was going to happen to the next presidential debate because of the disaster zone that was the last presidential debate. And so I've actually been thinking this morning, how is this going to impact the next one? I guess the next one is just right at the end of his quarantine. So that's one question I've been mulling. Trump needs a trajectory change. He needs a game-changing moment. He needs something to break his way that would alter the trajectory of the conversation about the race and his campaign. So I take all these things in through that kind of lens. And so if I were him, I guess I would probably take this moment I would go to the Oval Office and I would say, my fellow Americans, I have COVID, and here's the impact that it's had on me. I'm going to be working from home just like all of you. Really, it's a chance for him to cast himself with his people, which I'm not sure he's actually effectively done. I know this because I look at the polling and I see their demographics, people that supported him before that don't now, like senior citizens. I think one of the reasons he's softer among seniors is because they haven't perceived that he has taken their health as seriously in the pandemic as he should, because they know instinctively they're the most vulnerable. Well, this thing gives him a chance to try to rectify some of that through a personal story. And so that's one thing. I think if I had any advice for the Democrats, not that they're in the business of taking advice from me, but I think I would resist the urge to take to Twitter like I've seen so many have this morning and pray for the president's speedy death and basically take this sort of opportunity to gloat and attack. I think that is a horrific look, and I would advise everyone not to do it on the other side. So I don't have any data-driven answers because this is just happening, but my instinct is the president needs to use this moment to try to change the conversation on a topic that frankly has been an anvil on his head all year, at least politically.
Robbie, do you think this is going to hurt the president in terms of taking him off the campaign trail for the next 2 weeks, taking him out of the venues that he enjoys being in the most and where his base shows up? And what do you think about what Scott just said?
Yeah, well, and first of all, Alan, thank you so much for having me here and all that you do at Tufts. And Bennett, thank you for the introduction. And yeah, Scott and I, it's like I spend more time with Scott than I do any of the Democrats nowadays. We're teaching together. It's like I don't know what's happening to me, but it is always a pleasure and really, really great that we have so much opportunity to engage and hopefully create a setting where everybody can feel welcome and see themselves in this political process. That is always a pleasure to do, and Scott is a pleasure to do it with. And I think Scott hit on the key here, which is two key things, I think. The first is the president's problem thus far in the campaign has been that it is at a meta level been a referendum on his handling of this COVID crisis. And as Scott and I will, always say when we speak together, the president wants this to be a choice between him and Joe Biden. Just the same way, by the way, that I think George W. Bush and Barack Obama did a great job as incumbent presidents, really making it a choice between them and their opponent. They got up on the air early, defined that opponent, and it was really a back and forth. This campaign has been totally different. We've heard much less from Joe Biden, and I think that's been wise on the part of his team, because all we've talked about all day is the COVID crisis. Is the president doing a good job? Is he doing a bad job? So on and so forth. I was getting not concerned, but I was kind of watching closely coming out of this debate that I thought the dialogue in this race had pivoted a little bit more to just chaos. What a mess. This election's the craziest ever. Process stories about the voting system. I think what this has done against the president is to force back this COVID issue right front and center. So on net, that's probably not good for him. However, what's the Rahm Emanuel quote? Never miss the opportunity in a crisis, or something like that. I think Scott laid this out exactly right. The president should seize this moment to try to demonstrate his leadership in the crisis right now and pivot the focus of voters towards how do we get out of this? Because the one thing that Donald Trump has an advantage on in all the polling that Scott and I look at is on the economic recovery. The Republican Party has a good brand on that. He has a good brand on it. I obviously contest that assessment, but if he could look like he's finally gotten the memo that this is serious, we got to deal with it, and then he can thrust us into thinking about how we recover, that's a much better place for him. And then he can start to get it in a debate with Biden about tax programs, about economic recovery, about climate change and all that he seems to want to have. And then the last thing I'd say, and this is getting to your question, Alan, I think the president suffers from kind of a playbook out of 2016 of like, well, I won because I have big rallies with lots of people, and I win when I kind of hurl insults at my opponent. And I think he has trouble adapting to a new cycle. And so because of that, I don't see a high likelihood that he's able to do what Scott just said. I think he'll have trouble getting out of that old playbook, and trouble, frankly, showing some contrition, showing some humility, that, look, he got COVID too, right? It's a hard thing for him to do. Yeah. So I'm skeptical that he will seize the opportunity, because he often fails to. And in that case, I think then this again lays bare what Biden wants this to be about, which is, has Trump done a good job?
Yeah. We're going to talk about the debate in a moment, but there is a vice presidential debate between Vice President Pence and Kamala Harris on Tuesday. The final two presidential debates aren't scheduled to take place until later the month, and certainly too early to predict anything about that. But how do you think today's news will affect the messaging at this Tuesday's vice presidential debate, especially from the Democratic nominee, Kamala Harris? Robby, could you respond to that?
Yeah. Mike Pence is a tough guy to debate. He is, and this was challenging for us in 2016. I would argue, and I try to say this the most objective way possible, I would argue he is as untethered to the truth as Donald Trump, but he is incredibly smooth. He was a former radio broadcaster. He has this demeanor that makes him sound much more genuine and authentic than Trump. Trump, it's kind of, he wears his bombast on his sleeve, and when he says something that's not true, it kind of sounds like he's not telling the truth. And so I think there's a threshold challenge for Harris to navigate that. And I think where Kane ran into a wall, and I think where I would have done the prep for him much differently in 2016, once I saw the actual debate, was, he got into this rut where he was just fact checking. And then we talked about this a lot in reference to Biden. I don't think that fact checking issue came up as much in this last debate because Trump was so aggressive and bombastic that his behavior kind of overrode concerns about whether he was telling the truth or not. So I think as a threshold issue, that's going to be a challenge for her. And particularly because, look, he was the head of the COVID task force. So if I'm talking to her, I'm going to tell her, go in and hold him to account on his leadership on this COVID task force. But again, he's very adept at kind of, shall we say, gliding past the truth in a very smooth way. And so I think there's both promise in that, but also some peril. She could get dragged down very quickly if she gets into that same fact check trap.
I appreciate, by the way, Robbie saying that everything I said about Trump is not possible. But see, in these conversations, I'm the aspirational one, and Robbie is the real one. He's the realist. I'm the aspirationalist. On the VP debate, first of all, this COVID news aside, I think there are some real questions about how good Harris really is at any of this. She was not good in the primary. Obviously, she had to drop out fairly early, and her debate performances were unsteady. She's had some pretty, I think, uneven, it would be charitable, media appearances at some real softball stuff lately. I know why she's look. I just think she's not good at this. Pence is good at this. And there has always been peril in this engagement for them because, as Robbie said, Pence is a smooth guy. He's a smooth debater, and he knows what he's doing. And so I've always considered Pence to have the upper hand in this conversation. I think the question for Harris is how hard. Robbie mentioned that he can kind of hold Pence. She can hold Pence accountable for coronavirus. I think the question is, with the president suffering from it, how hard can you push before you cross the line of looking, it's too much. And so I think she's going to have to be careful about that. And the strategic question is, should she look into the camera and say, I wish for the president's speedy recovery, but I have to say, for a group of people who haven't taken this all that seriously, this is what you get. I mean, I'm curious to know if they're going to go down that road. And frankly, I'm curious to know whether that's what people want to hear or not. I haven't thought fully through that line of attack, but it must be something that will be debated inside the Biden campaign. I'm not one, by the way, who thinks VPs make all that much of a difference, and I'm not one who thinks VP debates make all that much of a difference. I would just say that in the last two incumbent presidential reelection situations, the VPs stepped in and squashed their opponents. Joe Biden squashed Paul Ryan in 2012, and Dick Cheney squashed John Edwards in 2004. And so at least in the last two successful incumbent reelects, the VPs have shown up after a shaky first debate from the incumbent and kind of righted the ship. And so I think after Trump's performance the other night, there is some pressure on Pence to do that.
Well, let's dissect what happened the other night for a moment. And Scott, the debate on Tuesday has been described by members of the press as everything from a scrum to a train wreck to a shit show. How would you describe it? And was there anything redeeming about the 90 minutes that we watched from your perspective?
I'm going to borrow a comment from my old mentor, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, who said this morning that, well, it wasn't Lincoln Douglas. I mean, look, no one, Robbie knows this. If you ever watch cable news or been part of cable news and you have to sit through a 6 or 7 minute political panel in which everyone's talking over the other one, it's uncomfortable, and I personally think it's unwatchable. Well, this was 90 minutes of that. Chris Wallace was essentially smacked in the face with a frying pan for 90 straight minutes and somehow survived it. I mean, to me, it was unwatchable. I was stunned when I saw the viewership numbers because there didn't appear to be any drop off from beginning to end. And so I was sort of stunned at it, honestly, that many people stuck around for it.
My wife gave up on it, I'll tell you that.
I mean, I have to watch it obviously for my job, and so I can tell Bennett what happened in class on Monday. But although he was supposed to be watching it too, but I was made uncomfortable by the whole thing. I wasn't surprised that Trump came out on offense. I was surprised that they never let the strategy breathe. I mean, his thinking was, I'm going to attack Biden, I'm going to trip him up, and I'm going to get him talking, and I'm going to trap him on a few of these issues and get him tripped up on things. But Biden never really had a chance to wrap himself around the axle because Trump never stopped. Trump was both participant and narrator and moderator. And he did all the jobs, which meant he never stopped talking. He actually had Biden on the ropes on a couple of matters. Biden has no answer on court packing, which neither does Harris, by the way, which has got to come up next week. And he took a couple of different positions on the Green New Deal in the span of about 15 seconds. I mean, he had him on a couple of issues. But Trump was talking so fast, he just never stopped to realize when the opportunity existed to score the point. And so it was a huge missed opportunity for him. And it was not good for the debate system. I know Robbie hates the Commission on Presidential Debates. I'll let him opine on that. But it was not good for the public discourse. It was not good for either of their campaigns. It was not good for America. I mean, there was nothing good about it. And I sometimes wonder, like, people around the world sort of peeking in on us every now and again. If they peeked in during that debate, they probably didn't see anything good about it.
I think a lot of people around the world were peeking in, and some of them were wringing their hands, and some of them were jumping for joy. Robbie, how would you analyze the debate's impact on the election? Do you think it shifted the race for either candidate? And let me just mention, the Boston Globe did a piece. They sent a reporter up to Maine, or they contacted a bunch of Maine voters to see, especially in Maine too, in the 2nd Congressional District, which is the only congressional district in New England that Trump carried in 2016. Yeah. But then a Democratic congressman won the race in 2018. And basically, their conclusion was that the debate did nothing to change any minds. In fact, it hardened the feelings that people already had for either candidate. Now, that wasn't very scientific, and you are a wise political strategist. What do you think its impact on the race was?
Well, I think there was a consensus from wise, unwise, and whatever else political strategists going into this that it wasn't really going to make much of a difference. And I think that is borne fruit. I've heard people argue here and there that it may have made some difference. I just look. How in the world, unless you were sealed off in a cave, could you have, before this debate, been unaware that Trump was angry and divisive and mean and bombastic? I mean, so I don't think anybody learned anything new. I think, for those of us who really object to Donald Trump and his way of doing things, we added, yet another grievance to our pile of grievances. But I don't think it really changed much. I think two things. I had two takeaways from it. One was, as Scott said, I've had kind of a grievance with the Commission on Debates since 4 years ago that I think we really need to step back and say, what do the voters need? And I think Trump is a perfect example of where some of these institutions, you can kind of take them and weaponize them against themselves. It's almost like an autoimmune thing. So, Trump just breaks all the rules. And then when you try to enforce the rules, he's aggrieved, right? And there's a whole system in place for people to buy into that. And so I think it just doesn't work. I don't think it's helpful. I don't think it was helpful in 2016. And I think that needs to be given some thought. The other thing I thought that was kind of interesting, I don't know if Scott agrees with this, the problem typically for incumbent presidents, they have a bad first debate. And typically that's because they go in and they haven't prepared, they think it's sort of almost beneath them to go on offense. And so they get very defensive early and they get down in the weeds. In fact, I actually thought Trump, kind of putting aside all of my deep stylistic disagreements, he went in there and he was like on offense. I mean, he was actually what you'd want, at least in terms of posture from an incumbent president. So he didn't have the problem where he was kind of cowering in the corner and he wasn't ready for the attacks. He just went in for the kill. So I think actually, in contrast to 2016, when he was effectively a challenger candidate, I actually think he's better suited for being an incumbent in this because he's so aggressive, but obviously it was totally overwrought.
Do you think his behavior was deliberate strategy or just an extension of his personality? Both of you.
Well, Scott should weigh in. Just quickly, I thought what I saw was a team had told him, throw Biden off his game, show that he's weak and he gets fumbled up and he can't come up with the right words because you saw he just kept nagging at him. So I thought some of that was prepped, but I totally agree with Scott. It was it was like too much.
Yeah, I agree with Robby that Trump didn't show the normal first debate incumbent demeanor, and I think he was prepped to go on offense. I think he just didn't know how to dial it back and allow the strategy to work. I think the incumbent mistake he clearly made, he did get that moment towards the end, why should the voters elect you? And he spent all of his time, there was that sort of, moment in the debate where they weren't interrupting each other and they both got to answer 2 minutes on why they should win the race. Trump laid out no second term agenda. He spent all of his time relitigating all of what he sees are his accomplishments, which are not insignificant, by the way. But a lot of incumbents want to relitigate their first term instead of say, here's what I'm going to do for you in the next 4 years. It happens all the time. And he missed that. He has missed this. He has whipped this question a number of times. He's gotten it from friendly media. He got it in the debate. He never sort of coherently says, 4 more years, here's what you're going to get. This doesn't happen. And so, as Robby mentioned earlier, if he allows that to persist and the whole campaign is a referendum on him, the person, and him, the guy with the job approval in the mid-40s, that's bad. But if the campaign is about a choice about what could be, that's firmer ground, and he missed that.
Well, one of the big takeaways was Trump's refusal to condemn white supremacy, even when he was directly prompted to do so. Some people were shocked by it, and others were not at all surprised. Scott, what do you make of that moment? Do you think the president believes that these nods to white supremacy or refusal to condemn it actually help him politically? And isn't that kind of a cynical view of it all?
Well, no, it clearly doesn't help him politically because he's had a number of these moments where he just has missed these questions. By the way, I should say, there have been times when he has gotten it correct. He has at times said the right thing and at times said the wrong thing. The problem with this topic, especially for Republicans, there's no margin for error here. There's only one right answer. I condemn white supremacy. This is wrong. If you are in an American city as the commander in chief, I am telling you, right wing, left wing, whoever you are, go home. I won't tolerate it. There's one right answer. I think where he gets tied up in knots is when he feels like he's being pressured to do something by the media, not just on this topic, but any topic. And he has an internal gear that is like, I will not permit the media to force me into doing something, even if it's in my own best interest. I mean, Chris Wallace sort of laid it on a tee for him to do the right thing. But because it was the media laying it on the tee, he didn't want to hit it. So I actually think it says more about this dynamic between him and not wanting to appear as though the press is leading him around on any topic. But it's a problem. I mean, it is. And then what happens? You get news cycles that follow. Every Republican running for every office from Senate to dog catcher has to answer questions about it for the next 48 hours. And I said that night on TV, he's going to have to clean it up. And guess what? They came out and he finally cleaned it up yesterday. So you can avoid these cleanups by not spilling it in the first place. But, it's been going on for 4 years. And I don't know why anyone's surprised, but it's a problem. What bothers me the most is he never learns from these cycles. He never learns from it.
Robbie, do you think he cleaned it up adequately the next day?
I don't. I mean, you mentioned at the top, there's some people were surprised, some people weren't. I wasn't surprised at all. He's always been on this message. When he changed his campaign team, I think the second time in 2016, he brought in Steve Bannon, and Breitbart's a website that peddles racist, Islamophobic, sexist, homophobic content. It's just, and what I don't know is he racist? Probably, I think he is. Or is it just a scheme to get elected? He has a set of people he thinks are out there. I mean, he said, stand by and stand back. He sees this as his grassroots organization. And so honestly, I'm actually I'm gonna end on a positive note on this, which is I think I hope and I believe the Republican Party is going to look very different when Trump is gone, because it doesn't have to be this way. George W. Bush had a totally different approach to immigration and race and so on. I think there are some Republicans who have always been in a bad place on this stuff, but I'm looking forward to going back to a time when we actually have to compete for voters of color more. We still have to compete now. We can't take anything for granted, but more because the Republican Party is being welcoming, right? And so, and I think there's a lot of talented people of color in the Republican Party. So, but it's just, I think Donald Trump sees this as a path to re-election in that playbook I was talking about, and I think it's repugnant.
Last night, Van Jones was asked who in the Republican Party could emerge as a unifying figure, in a post-Trump era. You mentioned Senator Scott from South Carolina. And frankly, I wasn't the biggest fan of President Reagan, but a friend of mine circulated a speech that he gave that was just inspiring and about welcoming people from all over the world to this country. And in any event, I want to actually ask Robbie something about Joe Biden. There was a moment in the debate when President Trump accused Biden of being pulled too far to the left by Democrats like Senator Sanders or Senator Warren. And Biden's response was, "I am the Democratic Party." Do you think that comment helped him or hurt him, especially with younger progressive voters?
Yeah, I mean, I again would say this is an example where I think for folks like us that watch this and we sort of feast over every little part, maybe on Twitter somebody cared. I don't think it matters in the long term. I think in his mind, what he was saying was the platform is the platform that, I led a process to create. It's not sort of what any person in the party believes or wants. I will say one of the stars of the debate, I think for us on the Democratic side, was AOC, because I think she did a great job chiming in to say, we're working together on this stuff. And, because what Trump was trying to do there, ironically, was not affiliate Biden with more progressive members of the party. He was trying to drive a wedge between them. And I think AOC, said pretty clearly, hey, we're going to work together and figure this out.
Well, I was watching a different network. I just stay tuned to CNN. I'm waiting to see Scott Jennings and hear what he has to say. How do you think the debate moderator, Chris Wallace, did? He actually moderated the final Clinton-Trump debate in 2016 and got high praise for it. And let me also add, well, Robbie, what did you think of the job Chris Wallace did? I have another question for Scott about the debate commission, although maybe I should switch those questions around.
Well, I thought he did a very good job, considering. I mean, and I think it was hard to walk away. What the tightrope he had to walk was, on the one hand, not to appear partial to anybody, but on the other hand, not to sort of embrace a false both sidism, to say, well, Trump can interrupt as much as he wants, but I'm going to treat him exactly the same as Biden. And I think he did his best effort to treat people fairly in the true sense of the term. Gosh, I am, if I were one of these next two that have to do it, my God, I would be reconsidering if I really wanted this. That was really hard what he did. Very, very hard.
I thought Wallace, it would be like if you were umpiring a baseball game and you showed up and you were standing behind the plate and the batter just kept hitting the catcher with a bat, or like would occasionally walk down the third baseline and kick somebody in the face. It was Trump was just doing things that were like, obviously Wallace just couldn't have anticipated. And how do you stop the guy with the bat from doing it? I mean, so I felt bad for Wallace. He totally lost control of it, although I'm not saying that's his fault. I mean, and so Trump made it very difficult for him to do his job. This mute button thing, I wrote a note here about it. I mean, that's what the commission wants to do now. And the minute that came out, I said, Donald Trump is never, ever going to accept that a member of the media or some other whatever, and I'm not sure any president of the United States would accept somebody saying, I'm going to mute you now. And then, of course, Trump tweeted yesterday, there will be no mute, or whatever it is that he said. I don't know how they're even going to pull that off. So I just, I felt for Wallace, and he's clearly chagrined by it, because he knows that when we retell the story of the 2020 campaign, no matter how it turns out, invariably the first paragraph will be, and then the night that Chris Wallace's debate debacle happened, ... And he knows that's forever going to be in presidential lore.
I actually, there's the French, I believe, have a system where you have a set amount of time, and if you've used it up, it runs out. And it would be very difficult with Trump, because you'd have to keep like clicking the button on and off with all the interruptions. But there's something appealing about, again, I think they need to blow up the whole structure, but there's something very interesting about that to me, because I actually think that would incentivize like Biden just to step back and let Trump go wild, and then his time will just run out halfway through, and then he can have the floor to himself.
What would the public be better served by? You guys tell me. Chris Wallace interviewing each of them on live national television for 30 minutes back to back, or what we saw?
Yeah, I think there's two things. I think there's what's good generally speaking, and then there's the issue of Trump specifically. And Trump just doesn't follow the rules, and he turns. It's like the Midas touch, but for chaos. Anything he touches like this, he'll turn it into chaos. And so I would consider one-on-one or something, because clearly we're not getting anything out of this.
Well, that said, we have two more presidential debates scheduled. Both of you have helped prepare candidates for debates, including presidential candidates. So let me ask you, Robby, how would you prepare Donald Trump for the next debate? And I'm going to ask Scott how he would prepare Joe Biden.
Well, I thought Scott had very good guidance here, which is go on offense, try to throw Biden off his game, right? But like let it breathe and let it work. I also think, and Scott mentioned this as well, and I hesitate when I say this because I just don't think he's capable of doing it. I don't think his temperament allows it. He's got to go in there and show that he understands what the country is going through, and that he has the maturity to care. And that, if you really step back, we have elected officials telling people not to buy into the first iteration of the vaccine because the president might be lying to you about whether it's healthy or not. That's why he's losing. Not because people think Joe Biden is too young and virile, right? So that would be the biggest thing. But I say it with hesitation because I have no idea how a team would ever get him to execute on that.
Scott, how would you prepare Joe Biden for the next debate?
I would prepare him the same way I would have prepared him for the first one, which is to say I would come out on the stage, and at the first opportunity, at the first question, I would say, if it's all the same to you, Mr. Moderator, members of the town hall, and people watching at home, I'm just going to pretend like he's not here because he lies. You all watched the last debate. I don't believe anything he says, and based on what I've seen, neither do you. And I could stand out here for 90 minutes and give you what we had 2 weeks ago, or I could just tell you what I'm going to do. And so, Mr. President, with all due respect, I'm going to act like you're not here because it doesn't help the American people. I think it would thrill Biden's base and his supporters would love it. It would cause Donald Trump's head to explode because being ignored is probably what he fears the most in this world. And it would just be kind of an alpha move, in a campaign where Trump's trying to be the alpha. And so that's what I would do. I mean, there's nothing Joe Biden can do about like Donald Trump interrupting him and all that. And so to try to put your foot on it right out of the gate could be a little bit of a tactic,
Robbie, you want to send the YouTube to Ron Klain?
Yeah, I was going to say, well, you can come. We'll gladly accept you.
Of course, I went on TV and I gave Biden advice on the first one. I said he should have come out at the first debate and with his checkbook and like pulled out and written a $750 personal check and put it on Trump's podium and said, "I heard you were having money troubles, friend." Like I'm always thinking of these stunts. Like I'm a PR guy. I shouldn't be running the country, but I can come up with stunts. That's what I should be doing.
Not bad. I'm going to ask one more question, then I think we have some students queued up, but this is about the media. So I watch CNN in the evening, whether it's Anderson Cooper or Chris Cuomo or Don Lemon. Don Lemon says, says our democracy is at stake. And last night, and then sometimes I switch to Fox News and Laura Ingraham, who's on at the very same time. And so last night I watched about 5 minutes of Laura Ingraham talk about the threat to democracy represented by the Democrats. I mean, it was just the mirror image. And I believe that, these two versions of reality that we see on different media outlets are one of the reasons why we're so polarized. And I imagine you might agree, but how do we fix it?
Wow, look at the time. I don't know. I mean, I typically, what would a conservative say about fixing anything? The market needs to fix this. Like it's at some point, the market forces need to come to bear here and fix it. And why would a market fix something? Because consumers aren't happy with what they're getting. Well, maybe we're there. I mean, if you look at all the polling about the media, it's less trusted than Donald Trump. I mean, people don't trust the media right now, and they don't like it. And so, the free market conservative in me says at some point the marketplace is going to fix this, and you're going to end up with media choices that actually people do respect and do trust. I always hate to say the media because I have friends in the media who, as individuals, I think do a very good job. I think the industry does a poor job at times, and they do things that hurt their own credibility. When you seek to be first, you are often not seeking to be right. And so when you're an industry that's trying to hold a public official like Trump accountable for not telling the truth, and then you make mistakes, it makes it hard. And they have done that a lot in this 4 years. And I do think they have treated Trump unfairly at times. Doesn't absolve him of his sins, but I do think they have treated him unfairly at times. And so I don't have all the answers, but I do think there is self-reflection that needs to go on inside the industry of media, just like there's self-reflection that needs to go on inside the industry of politics.
Robbie, you want to take a crack at that?
Yeah, I want to pick up on the last point that Scott made. I think it was, Singer who wrote that book, Like War, that's about social media and how it's been sort of weaponized. And he had a comment, which is social media does, I'm going to mangle this a little bit, but social media doesn't reward accuracy. It rewards speed and virality. And I think that is, to pick up on what Scott was just saying, that is what's driving things right now. And then you sort of put ratings under that. And so I think two things are happening. One is cable news. First of all, cable news, print news, and broadcast television, they kind of come together on social media to listen to each other. And again, that rewards something going viral rather than things being true or put in good context. And secondly, these cable outlets and social media are being focused on driving a few people to participate a lot. They make more money by having one person sit there for 4 hours than 40 people hang out for 5 minutes and check in or whatever. So when you're watching cable news, you're watching something tailored to a certain audience. And then social media, there's literally legally no cost to them for spreading a bunch of stuff that's not true. And that's, I think it is just not at all a coincidence that in the last 10 years, as these platforms have risen, that I think the quality of news programming and the political process has both gone down. And I think that's a place we just need to focus. And I think, a good analogy I use for this is when radio and then eventually television broadcasting came about, the government moved pretty quick to put in guardrails to say, if you're going to set up a broadcast radio tower and talk to a lot of people all at once, you got to get a license to do that. And there are just some ground rules. And like, you can't spread fake news, basically. And the concern back then was, hey, the Germans could come in and set up a radio station and misinform the American people in World War I, right? I think we need to think a little bit about that today. And I don't think imagine if in the 1950s, anybody could have set up a TV station and said whatever the heck they want with no guardrails. I think politics would have been a mess then too. And that's sort of where we've gotten to. So I think that's what's driving this. And I agree with Scott. It's not like the media is this Borg and it's bad people and all that. I just think the incentive is to get shared, spread stuff around rather than inform people and tell the truth.
I'll just add one thing, Alan, and I think this for every industry, but specifically for the media, from a Republican perspective, one thing that needs to occur is there needs to be more diversity in the newsrooms and in the media industry in general. As a Republican, which I am, would say, I just don't think they understand when they're covering the politics of this country, when they're trying to discuss issues, they just don't seem to understand my values, middle America, whatever they don't see people in these media organizations that have any idea at all how they see the world. And so I do think, like most organizations, media would benefit from diversity. And I don't just mean racial or gender. I mean geographic diversity of values, diversity of political viewpoints. I mean, these media people are not all independents, okay? And everybody has a point of view. Mm-hmm. Let's just be honest. It's basically liberal inside of news outlet, not universal, but basic, mostly. And so some diversity across the board would be, I think it's useful for virtually every industry, but it would be especially so for media.
So I have a suggestion. Why don't we get Fox News and CNN to merge? We have a student queued up. Naomi, do you want to ask your question? While we're waiting for Naomi, Eric Shapiro wanted to ask a question for Scott. How does Mitch McConnell really feel about Donald Trump?
I think that a misconception about McConnell and Trump is that they somehow are these two people that hate each other, but it's sort of like this, we have to get along, so we'll begrudgingly do it. They have actually forged a very productive relationship. Trump's a very different guy. Golfs on the weekends, sort of talks a lot, makes a lot of phone calls. I mean, he's that kind of person. Mitch McConnell does not do those things. He is not a social butterfly in that way, and he doesn't operate in the same way. So you have two very different personalities, but the unifying item is they both like to win. And what McConnell has done to build his relationship with Trump, I think, is deliver wins on judges, especially tax cuts, regulatory reform. When Trump needs something passed, basically McConnell takes care of it. And so that when you're delivering wins to somebody, that creates a lot of cohesion in a relationship. And so I think a lot of Democrats have, love to sort of pontificate about this relationship, but McConnell has said publicly that this has been the most productive period of center-right governance in his career, just in terms of delivery. And I think he'd probably still say that today, especially after they get buried on the court.
Naomi, are you ready?
Yes, sorry. Hi, so thank you for coming today. It's really cool to hear you both speak. My question is, for both of you, what is your most distinguished memory from working in the White House?
I'll start. I remember the first time I walked into the Oval Office, and I still think about it now. I'm from a very small town. I come from Dawson Springs, Kentucky. Fewer than 3,000 people. There's no stoplights, and there's one unnecessary four-way stop. And I remember walking into the Oval Office thinking, how did they ever let somebody from middle of nowhere America into the Oval Office? And at that moment, I thought a lot about, I'm here serving the president, but I'm the representative of the people from where I come from. Because in a town, not everybody I know, very few people I know, maybe nobody I know is ever going to be in that position. And so my memory was just feeling the weight of that and feeling the humbleness of it. Andy Card, who was chief of staff that swore me in, once told me that the minute you walk through these doors and you don't stop and look around and realize and you're not in awe of it, that's the minute you should resign, because you're not taking it serious. Every day you walk in here, you need to be in awe of this because of how awesome it is. And that was some advice I always took to heart. And from the first day I was there to the last day, I was in awe of it every single day. But it had a lot to do with, feeling proud to represent, what I perceive as a part of America that doesn't. And look, I didn't go to an Ivy League school. I don't have donor parents. I'm the son of a garbage man. Most people who wind up in these things are, have advantages. I had nothing. And so I just felt like it was important that people that have backgrounds like me had a chance to be part of it at the top level.
Well, Andy Card would have been a good mentor for you. He's a great son of Massachusetts. He's been a guest at Tufts. He's a good man.
Yeah.
Robbie, you want to speak to that?
I've never worked at the White House.
But you've been there.
So I've been inside twice, I think. And I always went in that sort of side door, and then I went right into the chief of staff's conference room. So that, or maybe it was his office. I don't even know. I've never been to the Oval Office. I've never been to what's the conference room, the Lincoln Room, or what's
the Roosevelt Room.
Roosevelt Room, excuse me.
And the Roosevelt changes depending on which administration is in charge. When I worked there, of course, it was the Teddy Roosevelt Room.
So that's as much as I could do for you. It was very.
You have been in the office of the Speaker of the House.
I've been in the office. Actually, I've been in the office of the Speaker of the House twice as well. And to Scott's point, I've been out on the Speaker's balcony. I brought my brother lives in Louisville. And he and his wife and kids came to DC, and so that was the time I went out on the Speaker's balcony. I brought them out, and they love that. It incredible, that view. Very
If you'll indulge me, Alan and Naomi, one quick story. The first time I ever flew on Air Force One, which was also an awesome experience. So you sit in these seats and there's phones. You can call people, but the way you call people is you pick up the phone and then some Air Force officer who's has a much more important job than me has to make the call for you. And so there's a white phone and a red phone. So I'm sitting there and I'm like, I got to call my dad. So I pick up the red phone, not knowing which was which. And the guy goes, Mr. Jennings, so he knew where I was sitting. Mr. Jennings, do you really need to make a secure phone call? And I said, I do not. And I hung up, and then I picked up the white phone, and it was the same guy. And he was like, okay, now who do you want to call?
Now we're good.
So little things you learn along the way. But anyway, I got to call my dad from Air Force One, which is pretty cool.
Well, that is pretty cool. That is pretty cool. We've run out of time, but I want to give you both just a chance to maybe make some concluding remarks about how important November 3rd is, maybe give some advice to the students who are listening, how important it is that they show up, and what sustains your faith in this democracy that sometimes seems to stumble over itself.
Sure thing. Well, I can start. And Alan, thank you so much again for having us. And thanks to everybody who tuned in. I will never forget, I ran Get Out the Vote for John Kerry in Wisconsin in, I guess that was 2004. And I remember, we actually won Wisconsin by 0.4%, but we lost the presidential contest. And it's funny to look back because at the time, and that was utterly devastating. I mean, George W. Bush, the war was happening. I mean, it felt like the world was going to end as a result of him getting reelected, which seems sort of funny now. And I'll never forget the Governor Doyle at the time did the nicest thing. He opened up the governor's mansion and had a little party for us, brought us in, and we had a bunch of good Milwaukee beer and pretzels and all that good stuff. And I remember him just saying to us, he said, I've been where you are right now. I think it was 68, when Nixon won, and then 72 and Nixon won again. And he said, I know that you feel like this is all a waste of time. It doesn't matter what you do. You can't win. And that really affected me. First, that he was kind enough to bring us in and acknowledge our work. I just sort of never experienced that, to have someone, this big, important governor do that. But I really listened to that, and I carried it with me. I was skeptical. And then, there we were 4 years later, we had won back the Congress, we won back the White House, we had 60 members of the Senate, big, healthy majority in the House, and we got a lot done. Now, the tables turned yet again. But I guess I would just say, like many things in life, patience is essential in politics. Patience with yourself, patience with the process. It does belong to the people, and not everybody always agrees with you and me. And sometimes the rules are stupid. And why is it that more than half the country can pick someone to be president, but they don't get the job? How does this? But rewards come to those that stick with it and really fight for what you want. And I think the history of our country is the history of people who got knocked down a ton of times, but it's the ones that stuck with it and won. And I think particularly, I'm going to beat up on social media again, I guess, today. I think as a society today, we tend to reward, just say the right thing, just put the right, infographic on Instagram and you're good. Women didn't get the right to vote in this country because they posted the right thing, right? People of color didn't get the right to vote in this country that way. They had to work. It took decades. And so I just think that perspective is important. And I really do believe we can come out from what I think is a very dark time in our history even better and stronger. but we have to vote. And more importantly, we have to stick with it and work our butts off.
Of course, you know why your party did so well in 2008 is because young voters showed up.
Exactly.
Scott,
Exactly.
Scott, you have the last word.
Oh, you're on mute.
Love it when I get to talk last and Robby doesn't get to follow me and correct me. This is amazing. I like Robby's message about patience. I used to work for a guy who used to say, instant coffee ruined the world and everybody wants everything right now. And I've stolen that and I use it all the time. I'm hopeful for America. I mean, I know things seem bad right now, and it's easy to flip on your cable news channel of choice and just sort of feel depressed about it. But I'm hopeful about America. I believe in America. I believe in my fellow Americans. I believe in the fundamental durability of our institutions. They're being tested, but I believe in the durability of all this. And because I think the ideals are timeless. And I think deep down, we all believe in it. And I have this belief that timelessness of what we're building will defeat any darkness. And so I'm bolstered, Alan, by the students. I love going into class on Monday and hearing from the students, and I hear the hopefulness and I hear the questions and I hear the engagement, and I'm bolstered by that. And it's what really drives my optimism. I would just say to anybody watching this, it is a privilege for us to be able to hop on a thing like this and speak freely to each other and to disagree. And Robby can offer up dissenting opinions to the people who are in charge and not fear that somebody's going to come down and hassle him or worse. That's an amazing privilege. And I would just say guard it with your life, because it's all we have is the ability to speak and think freely. And it is the underpinning of everything we do. I would also say finally that nothing in politics is permanent. Things change. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. And whether you win or lose, you got to run again in 2 years or 4 years or 6 years. There's always another election. And you can never get too high or low in this business. And so I would just say to anybody who's thinking about going into it, never stop fighting, never lie for anyone else, and always keep your eyes on the horizon. And don't get too caught up in the moment.
Well, thanks to both of you. We really appreciate this. I know our audience, who we can't really see, who are applauding wildly now for both of you. And I hope we'll see everybody at our next Civic Life Lunch, which is on Monday. And I think Jess is going to mute everyone. I just want to have a quick word with you guys. And thanks all for joining us.